Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome from Acronym Mike Grehan, from Wolters Kluwer Cohen, from Slack Kelly Watkins, from Google Louis Gray, from Newscred Lisa Kalscheur, and from Yext Duane Forrester.
How fabulous it is to see us all getting back together again. You know, I feel over this past couple of days we've got to know each other so well. I'd like to invite you all back to my place later. Why not? Somebody better tell my wife. All right, so this is it. The final part of the conference, and I always look forward to this. We've had 2 fabulous days, great speakers, absolutely fabulous content, just every aspect of the business. And at this part, this is where we get to bring some of the super big brains from the industry together. Friends of mine as well, you know, people who like you have to wake up every day and think, well, I have to get stuff done. So the kind of session is all about marketing 2018. Where is it going? That's a big, broad subject. So we'll be here for 24 hours at least, I think.
Get comfortable.
Yeah. This is the after party. Too.
Exactly. So you heard some names as these guys were coming out. So we've got Lou, Kelly, Lewis, Lisa, and Duane, who you already know. But I'm still going to do the same thing. I think we'll just run down the line. Tell us exactly who you are, what you do, why you're here. We'll start with you, Lou.
Sure. Lou Cohen, I'm the CMO of Wolters Kluwer Legal and Regulatory in the U.S., also a professor of digital marketing at NYU in Baruch here in New York. Been a customer of Conductors for years, back during my days at Citi, and truly a digital-first marketer.
Kelly.
Hi, I'm Kelly Watkins. I'm the VP of Global Marketing at Slack. Raise your hand if you use Slack. Awesome, thank you. For those of you
wow,
who
she brought the entire customer base with her.
For those of you who don't, we're a collaboration hub for teams, so we make it easy for teams to work together.
I'm Louis Gray. I work at Google. How many of you use Google?
Just had to get one
totally.
better.
I work on Google Analytics, which is a great way to measure everything that you do and tie it back to actual results.
Very cool.
Lisa Kalscheur. I'm the SVP of Marketing at Newscred, which is the leading enterprise global content marketing company. We have like the best brands in the business, Fortune 500 companies as our clients. So that's like First Republic Bank, Twitter, Rue La La, to name many more. But you might say, okay, it's a content marketing company, so what really makes you different? And the difference that we provide is actually tying content to dollars, which is kind of like the next frontier and the final frontier. So I'm really proud of that differentiation. Prior to Newscred, I was at AppNexus on the other side on advertising, and really proud of the work I did there, scaling a 40-person company to 1,200 and a $1.2 billion valuation. And I maybe shouldn't be saying this, but I actually believe in the really deep kind of synergy and complementary nature of content and advertising. So perhaps we'll talk more about that.
We surely will.
Thanks for having
Duane,
me.
Go ahead and beat all of that.
I'm still Duane Forrester, still Vice President of Industry Insights at Yext. Yeah, still Vice President of Industry Insight at Yext. Still used to run Bing Webmaster Tools. I am a firm believer in all of you, and we can talk about that later.
Oh, that was very philosophical. Yeah. All right, so let's just get down to the brass tacks. We had a conversation together on the phone, and I think we did the entire session on the phone. Maybe we should have just brought the recording. But so what I'm going to do, let's traditionally, ladies first this time. Kelly, what is it? When we talked about the whole notion of marketing 2018, what I was actually trying to get from you guys when we were talking is, what is it that you're thrilled about? What have you done this year? But what are the challenges that you think that you have to deal with this year? What's coming your way? What do you have to get ready for?
Sure. I think there's a couple things. And when it comes to things that keep me up at night, there's a few. One certainly is hiring. And I'm sure that's for everybody, for all of you in the room. And I just think we're at such an interesting point right now in where marketing is evolving as a discipline, because we are becoming more data-driven. Growth hacking has really, I think, influenced what it means to be a modern marketer. But I'm always looking for people who are storytellers, and I think those people are becoming harder and harder to find these days. So hiring's definitely keeping me up. And then as well...
Give me a description of a storyteller. How does that go?
I'm sorry?
Description of a storyteller.
Yeah, I mean, I think somebody who can really craft a narrative that can talk to humans in a way that is human. So, when we focus a lot on data, when we focus a lot on some of these other techniques, I think the quality of what we're putting out in the world can sometimes really tank, right? So it's becoming this gamification of headlines like A/B tests, like if I put this word here versus this word here, like do I get 5% lift in click-through rates on this particular piece of content that I'm putting out? But what's the substance? What's the thing that gets somebody to care? What's the value that you're providing to the person who's actually engaging with what you're putting out in the world? And in my experience, it's becoming harder to find people whose orientation is that first, rather than just sort of, metrics driven, which isn't to say metrics is bad by any stretch of the imagination, but it's the combination of both that I think is the most powerful.
It's kind of like there's a story behind every number. Yeah, exactly. Lisa, what's keeping you awake?
Yeah, well, what's keeping me awake is I actually am going to sort of take that a step further with what Kathy said, or rather Kelly, sorry about that. So, it's really the content at the center. Like that is our Newscred value proposition, and that is critically important. So if you think about voice, if you think about chatbots, if you think about new technology, really the most important thing is to create great content. So like personal example, like my husband and I are thinking about getting a new puppy. We're like, this is really scary, but we've always had dogs. So when I think back to childhood, and I had a dog that primarily consumed Science Diet. So I'm like, okay, this is the brand I know. This is the brand, I love and grew up with. And so now that we're considering getting a new puppy, I have that brand loyalty. But they actually Science Diet does a really good job, and owned by Chewy, of actually getting me the content that I want to make sure that our new puppy lives a long and healthy life. So whether you think about research centers or blogs or, how to live an organic lifestyle with your puppy, like that's the content. So it's like I have the brand awareness of Science Diet, but that's the kind of content that I will consume that will make me an advocate. And by the way, the greater content they consume, the greater content they create, the actual more likely they are to appear at top search results. And also when you think of Google Home, they're really just pulling up the answer box. So the focus to me, and you'll hear this multiple times, and yes, it's because I'm at Newscred, is like just the idea of like keeping content at the center. Like you can't go wrong when you build, as Joe Polisi said yesterday, if you build subscribers instead of customers.
And that's a great idea. It's a great thought, the subscribers instead of customers, and thinking about that content-first approach.
Yeah.
Lou, you have some specific difficulties in terms of content that we discussed.
Just a few. So I'm not going to ask how many people know Wolters Kluwer, because I'm sure it's very few. But Wolters Kluwer, for those not familiar, is a portfolio of companies, and I'm in the legal and regulatory business. And so a topic that tends to be a little popular right now is information about cannabis law. You may be familiar with the subject. The problem is if I put content out there about cannabis law, and we have products that support that research, you are not my customer. A law firm would be. And the information that I have about cannabis law is really about states' rights versus federal laws and how those things interact. And so a government organization trying to craft their laws around cannabis would want our content around this. But if you're trying to understand, is it legal to smoke something in my state or not, this is not for you. But the content, as you could imagine, is a little provocative. And so we do have to think about how to craft it, place it, make it discoverable, and ensure that the right audiences are actually reaching our information and bringing that into our system.
Could be the only guy in the room where cannabis is keeping him awake at night, to be honest.
Potentially. I mean, you never know.
So, Lewis, how do we tie all of this that we're hearing into analytics and measure all of this kind of stuff? I mean, in terms of developing the content, we have to be able to not just throw it out there in the wild. What do we have to do when it's out there and know that we're being successful with it?
Well, I think Kelly had a great point when it talks about storytellers. One thing that I find is that we still struggle to break through the noise. There's a lot of places to get content now, and there's a lot of people who are spending time with their phones or spending time on websites who don't have an intent to buy, and that's okay. And I think as marketers, what we need to learn is understanding exactly where our potential customers are and when they're in the right frame of mind for buying. And so Kelly had a good example about changing a few headlines here and there with A/B testing, and trust us, we love A/B testing. But even if your click-through rate is higher, but your conversions and actual sales don't follow through, that was not a successful campaign. And so I did a talk yesterday that talked about hearts, charts, and shopping carts, and you need all three for this to be successful. And with analytics, I'm not selling any of this stuff, but when you use analytics, it helps you understand what's working and what's not. And so you can get beyond that 5% CTR and instead look at a total return on ad spend and make sure you're doing the right things that have impact to your business.
So after your session yesterday, by the way, about 15 minutes later, I was whistling a tune to charts, carts, and shopping carts, or whatever hearts chart.
Yeah.
It's a good tool. Let's just shift the focus a little bit, because obviously you did the session before this. Not everybody was at that session. But we're talking about what's the focused marketing 2018 from a local point of view, from the Yext point of view. Does it make any difference? Is there a wow, this is going to be a huge change in local this year, or?
For me, and it comes down to data integrity and truth of data. And this touches on what Kelly was talking about, and this concept of storytelling, it really resonates with me. I've actually done some acting classes with actors in LA recently. It's a byproduct of living in LA. You get involved with this stuff. What's been fascinating to me, though, is I'm not an actor. I'm doing voice work and then taking improv classes. So you end up kind of tangentially learning more about what it takes to be a good actor. And the core of everything is authenticity. And prior to that, there has to be a truthfulness. So I have to identify my audience. And I could say, I'm a science diet guy for my dogs, and I could say, well, if I'm gonna do something that's gonna appeal to a person who would like this, I would say, okay, well, Lisa's a typical buyer. She's, young, she's successful, she has a dog, maybe 2 dogs, and I could build this audience in my mind. And that is completely the wrong way to do this. The way you do this is, I think about my buddy Dave, who is my best friend, and I tell him about the product. It is authentic, it resonates, that connects with consumers. On top of that, if that data layer isn't obviously accurate to the engines, they start to back away. They start to lose trust, they lose faith. And don't think for a second that you're the one source that they're going to look at that. That data about whatever it happens to be exists in some cases, tens of thousands to millions of locations around the internet. And if they're all slightly different and skewed, you've got Bingbot and you've got Googlebot out there looking at it going, well, why don't we just have one source of truth, please? That'd make it easy. And so, I think one of the biggest challenges for local businesses is this concept of knowing what they have, how to manage it, and then what is the next big thing that's happening. And the next big thing that's happening, and I just talked about this, is consumer change around voice. Because now people are sitting on their sofas saying, I'll say this, you'll all love me for this. Hey Siri, she light up. Best tacos. And it's such a human moment. I mean, we all get what we mean by best tacos, right? Like tacos that don't suck, that we enjoy. Siri has a very different understanding of the concept of best and how she delineates that and then gets me that information. And so, I think for a local business, the challenge ultimately is knowing who they are and then knowing what they are. That is a profound challenge at that local level. And when you're a company, it doesn't get any easier, because now you've got a brand layer on top of it. So you've got a group of people whose job is to tell you who you are. I had a call yesterday morning with a company, it's a mortgage company, huge mortgage company. And their SEO is sitting there saying, well, we like to think of ourselves as like a mom and pop organization. I'm like, you're the 3rd largest mortgage broker in America. I'm pretty sure your C-suite doesn't see you as a mom and pop organization. You shouldn't be thinking that way either.
So that's kind of an interesting segue as well. But by the way, I just bought tacosthatdon'tsuck.com. That's my new brand.
Oh, excellent.
We'll take
Excellent.
some notes on that.
Exactly. So what you're saying there, when you talk to the SEO guy, of course, that's a huge component of what happens here at C3. And you guys work for very large companies, big brands, big names, whether you work at that company or they are your clients. How important is search, particularly SEO, now when you're talking to your clients or to the C-suite? I mean, trying to be kind of that ambassador within the organization, the evangelist. Is there still a problem with that, or does everybody get it? Or do they just think, search, we did that?
No.
I think, particularly in B2B, there is still a bit of a problem catching up. One of the reasons you bring a guy like me into a B2B company is because you want to change that scenario. I mean, my career was built on search. And
so you were with Citi before you...
Yeah, so I was with Citi, Microsoft before that, and a series of e-commerce startups before that. But the tone that I hear even from others in the B2B world is still, we don't see the ROI off of that. We'd rather have a person go talk to the customer. And the reality is, and we saw this in your earlier presentation, Duane's talked about it, the reality is people are not discovering what they're going to buy through that last mile with a sales rep, even B2B. They're doing discovery of content throughout a whole life cycle that is months and months before, and we've known this for a long time in the B2C world. B2B is still, in a lot of places, struggling to catch up.
Lewis, which search marketing firm does Google use? I'm checking, it's all right, I'm joking.
And this is fun because we run into SEO a lot. And living in the world of Google Analytics, any words that we say can be construed as gospel from Google, and I have none of that, I assure you. We're a big enough company that people who make those decisions work in a different building. Okay. But what that does mean is that when we do marketing campaigns, SEO is not an afterthought for us, right? This is something that comes up. You know, how did we perform? Are we even considering this? You know, the Google voice is very different than those that are trying to penetrate your visibility through unique headlines. Google always tries to be a little bit more mellow, a little bit more soft. We don't come out with exclamation points. We don't say we're the best. We just try to give a good story that makes sense for users. And so sometimes our voice is not great for SEO. And that's okay, because we want to make sure that the story that's there is more important. I don't think we use any SEO firms, sir.
I was just checking, we're available. Anyway. What do you think? Is there still a major challenge that, I mean, I've been in this industry for 20 years, and I just assume that everybody understands. This is at the root of everything. This is where your customers start. They wake up in the morning and they search for stuff, and you need to know how you can help them along. And I still wonder whether people fully understand that, you know?
I think the conversations that I see happening now, that one of the things that I find most interesting is I don't see people actually thinking about where somebody is in the buyer's journey when it comes to search. So, you know, people will say all the time, well, why don't you just bid on this like super weird non-branded keyword, drive people to this landing page, and like they'll convert like that. And I find it to be such like a fascinating mythology that's being spread around. I mean, for us, how we think about it at Slack is we do a lot of SEM. SEO is something we're actively investing in, but there's a difference in what we perceive someone's intent to be when they're searching for Slack versus when they're searching for something else. And I think it can feel very like jarring and off-putting to people if you're intentionally bidding on non-branded keywords and the call to action is like, use the product in this very like kind of overt, almost desperate way. I think in those moments, like you've got to think about education, you've got to think about providing value. Again, like what Lisa said, content matters so much then. And there's almost, I think, got to be, when it comes to this world, like a little bit more patience on our part as marketers, and a little bit more perspective thinking about where our customer is, because you know, if it takes like a multi-touch attribution model and you've got to walk people through like a bigger consideration cycle, that's okay. But like do the work of getting people through that in a way that makes them feel awesome, gives them positive sentiment about your brand, actually provides value rather than just trying to gamify it by, you know, bait and switch.
So Lisa, I'm going to come to you right now because that again, it's an unusual thing that given that I've been talking about intent, understanding intent for such a very long time, that there is this kind of process that we go through, you know, from informational, navigational, transactional, seething to whatever you want to call it. And Kelly, you just mentioned there, you jumped in with paid search first, but now you're thinking about SEO. It's kind of like the afterthought, and part of the problem that I still get when I'm talking to people now is how do I add $1 to that early stage content? Because with paid search, I can add $1. I can take one and I can make one, you know? And you talk a lot about how do you turn content into $1, yeah?
Yeah, so I mean, we actually have a specific customer example with Panasonic Toughbook. It's exactly what you're saying, Kelly. So Panasonic Toughbook, it's like they're all about workplace, like rugged mobility. And so what we found with them is that they were creating fantastic content around workplace mobility, but they were hitting people in the wrong places. So they weren't actually looking at where those folks were in the customer journey. So for instance, if I'm, you know, browsing on social and I see a article about rugged mobility, which is interesting to me, but I click through, you've distracted me. So the intent is totally different. So if you actually look at search and intent, like I am in that bottom stage of the funnel. It's like then I want to read a resource center or long form content, and you've actually captured me. So I think really mapping that customer journey and that content journey, and people are at different places, so you really have to understand where people are. You can actually lose customers that way. And Panasonic did a great job and are working with them to like actually parse out the different phases of the buyer journey and make sure that we were delivering content and unique calls to action that were actually relevant. Otherwise, you're on social, it's like, this is irrelevant, like, you know, and it can create negative brand impressions.
Exactly. Lewis, the customer journey or the path to purchase, it is a very fragmented thing now. People just don't go to a browser and search for something and buy it. It's cross-platform, cross-device, those kind of things. I mean, for the future in terms of being able to measure whether you're being successful from an analytics point of view, is there anything special that we should be doing in terms of being able to map that customer journey?
Right, and so this is something that we've seen evolve quite a bit for us. We talked about a little bit yesterday in the rise of mobile. How many of you are using your phones right now? There's a good show of hands. And that's okay. You know, I said this yesterday. I'm not even mad if you guys want to be on your phones during this presentation, because we're all doing it. This is something that's happened over time as we've gone away from having a dedicated device where people just do one thing and we assume intent. I thought it was interesting, Kelly, you mentioned SEM. One of the catches with SEO versus SEM is a lot of people assume SEO is free. Right? They say, oh, it just happens and we get lucky with Bing, we get lucky with Google, we float to the top. But search engine marketing, that's paid for, right? And so what's happening over time is as we assume most of the activity, be it casual or intent-based, is happening on the mobile devices and is increasingly fragmented, we need to find a way to measure it all the way through. Google acquired a company called Firebase a couple years ago, which is really incredible in the type of stuff that they're doing. And my understanding is that they chew through more data now than Google Analytics does. And that's wild.
Wow.
Right? And that's because mobile is the greater piece than the desktop now. And so one of the things I wanted to highlight was people as marketers need to experiment. And that doesn't mean throwing 10% of your budget at something you're not familiar with. But we always have to try new things. And actually, when you try new things before anybody else, that's when they're the cheapest. I remember being among the first to really push Twitter or being among the first to try AdWords. I remember paying pennies on the dollar on things when eventually they became dollars on the dollar, right, obviously. And so it's okay to go out and experiment with new channels, be they Snapchat or Instagram or Twitter or Facebook or VR if you're thinking about something like that, and find a way to try and track it back. And if something's not working, you stop and you try something else. And when we talked about intent, if you find that you get a lot of views on a platform but not a lot of click-throughs, people aren't looking to buy. They're looking at pretty pictures.
Exactly. So of course, when we talk about search now, you can't get away from the fact that it's voice-activated queries and it's mobile. And that's an area that you've spent a lot of time looking at, Duane. Do we need to create different content for a voice-activated query? Do we need to do something different, or?
Yeah, so this is a really interesting thing. On one hand, the answer is you're already doing the work you need to do to participate. And I'm assuming that everybody is making it their goal to be the answer box, that that's what you want to be. And if you follow the path to become that, you're creating compelling content, it's conversational, you're paying attention to what the consumer is asking and giving them answers in a thoughtful manner. You are predicting what the next logical series of questions and thus answers is from that to perpetuate a conversation with the consumer. It's all of those pieces. And so it never fails. Every time I sit down with a company now, they say to me, all right, what are the opportunities in paid in voice? And it's like record scratch. Like, you clearly have been paying attention. There's no paid in voice right now. So take that out. There's no shortcut. I know you're looking for it. SEM hound, you know? And to the point, SEO is not free. I have a 20-year career as an SEO. I guarantee you I got paid good money and I had good benefits. That is a hard cost to every company I worked for. That takes a lot of work. And yet companies are only now starting to think about, well, how do we leverage all that? How do we leverage the content we're doing? How do we leverage our data footprint through analytics that we're seeing? How do we leverage the proper connection with a consumer? And then what are the other pitfalls and issues that we have? And I see this whether you're in fintech with its own rules of engagement, healthcare, legal, all of these things come up and they kind of shape what that looks like. But the bottom line is, you want to get in search, it's relatively easy right now. And these are the penny days of search. Like, people need to get in there and start cementing the fact that they are the worthwhile answer. Because if they don't, then someone else will. And we will find ourselves in a position where we don't need 10 answers to the single question. We only need one good answer.
Agreed.
So let's just shift it up just a little bit. The session that I did this morning was all about, Google talks a lot about marketing in the age of assistants, and we have digital assistants. I had them both in there trying to look at some of the changes that are taking place. People do tend to think with this device that, you pick it up and start speaking into it and you're asking Google for something or you're doing a Google search, and yet research shows that about 60% of the time you're actually using apps and doing something else. You don't necessarily always have to go into the browser and do a search. So digital assistants are kind of a multimodal thing where if I ask Siri to book me a table, I don't need Siri to go to Google and search for a table. I want Siri to go to Open Table and book the table and finish the transaction, get the job done for me, and that's it. Is this an opportunity, a challenge? How do you guys feel about that?
Yes.
Well, isn't the bottom line people are looking for utility with voice, so we must provide that? We must provide the answers, the recommendations, we must provide the utility.
So I don't think the answer. So for a brand, so I don't think the answer is always just it's the answer box. I think for SEO now for everybody, that's the best way to do it, to be the best answer. I finished the session this morning by pointing the audience to Think with Google, where they have a little tool that shows you these are the top questions that people are asking. But I think from a sorry, Lo, I'll be within a second. just a personal thing that I was thinking. I'm going to get a little bit personal for a second here.
Oh, boy.
Because I was thinking about the age of assistants and the age of assistants, okay, and how close we've become to these things. How many people have got one of these? An Apple Watch? Yeah.
So
my wife bought me this 3 years ago. This is going somewhere, by the way, okay? So my wife bought me this 3 years ago because I'm a gadget guy. And when I got it and I looked at it, I was really disappointed because I thought, what a stupid thing an Apple Watch is. I mean, it's all right if you go running around the block and go to the gym. I'm not going to do any of that. It's a complete waste of technology on me, seriously. And then I start talking to Siri and I'm like, apart from tell the time, Siri, do something useful. And she's like, I don't understand the question. I said, well, I just want you to do something useful. She goes, I don't understand the question. You need to go to apple.com. I was like, well, I go to apple.com. It's because I'm sending this back. It's absolutely useless, Why am I telling you this, okay? So it's a bit personal, okay. So I'm 63 years old, and when you get to my age, things stop working and bits fall off and all kinds of things, you know. So
It's true.
So I have a heart condition that I have to deal with, all right? And it's called AFib. I don't know if some of you may know what that's about, okay? But it comes with a complication because I have high blood pressure as well. So what happens is I take this medication to keep the blood pressure down, and I've also got to do something about the AFib. It gets a bit complicated, but what happens, this is it. What actually happens is if my heart slips into AFib, I don't know. I can't tell. There are no signs to it, and this is the worst thing that could happen to me because this is either going to be a stroke or a heart attack or something, yeah? This is the third generation watch, and this is where I'm going with it. The reason that I wear it, and I wear it so proudly now, is this watch actually monitors my heart. It has a special feature built into it, so if I slip into AFib, it's actually going to save my life. Thank you, Siri. My original question is, how useful can you be? So the relationship that we have with digital assistants and assistants, it's a different thing. But you know what? I'm stuck with this watch and this feature now. I think Apple gives it to me, but if it came from Xarelto, the people that make the drug, then I'd have that great feeling towards that particular brand. So there are kind of a lot more opportunities in being able to provide assistance in my life and also become the brand that I prefer.
So I want to jump in that. First thing, very cool that works. There's a friend of mine who started working at a LiveCore. Vic Gandotra is working at a LiveCore right now. And they have a specific product that you should check out that's specifically about AFib and predictions and doing it all, which is integrated with Apple Watch.
Very cool. Thank you for the advice.
So that's an ad for somebody else. One of the things you talk about assistance, obviously being exposed to some of the Google Now is what we used to call it, and the assistant capabilities early is seeing it when it's not yet done. That's one of the best things about working at Google is trying stuff when it's broken before we hand it to you guys. And so one day I remember being at home and I get this notification on my phone that says 22 minutes to unknown place. It's like, what the heck are you talking about? And so I look and I was trying to figure this out, and what I realized was that it was a Saturday afternoon, and Google had figured out that every Saturday afternoon I drive to a park in San Jose where my kids were playing t-ball. And so it knew I probably needed to tell Lewis that it takes 22 minutes to get there, but I don't know what to call it. And so I realized this because it had happened over so many weeks in a row. I'd gone to this t-ball practice and wanted to let me know what traffic was going to look like. And that was the first time when I realized the power of assistance, that this is happening and it will teach you and it will get better. And I think one of the things that we start to do is take this for granted, that it just works. Well, of course it works. But 3 or 4 years ago, it was really cool. And now we have things, I don't know how many of you use Google Photos, where I'll take a bunch of photos and I'll just quietly in the background make them look better. It will create movies for you, it'll create collages, and it just works. And so what I think you're happening to see is that the assistants are starting to save you time from things that you didn't even know that you could do, and they'll just give them to you.
And to add to that, I mean, with the point of, for both of you, is save you time. There's the efficiency component, but there's also saving your life. Like American Heart Association, working with Alexa, is actually, like I have 2 kids. Like my caregiver, I'm not completely confident she knows how to give CPR. So she can actually ask, and through the American Heart Association, like save my children's life. So this is, efficiency plus much, much more, right?
I have to tell you, I didn't intend to turn this into a medical therapy session.
Yeah, exactly.
But there's some very cool advice going on.
But there's so much more, Mike.
So much more.
So much more. This fall, there's a Wi-Fi router coming to market. The Wi-Fi signal will be capable of tracking your heartbeat. So that Wi-Fi router will know when you're excited by the video you're watching on YouTube.
So creepy.
Anyway, moving on.
So I feel like the Luddite up here, I still wear like an actual wristwatch. So
What is that?
I know.
So what does your watch do? Tell me.
I remember
It
those.
keeps time.
Well, that's cool.
What else does it do?
That's it. I don't know. I mean, I see the potential in this area, but also like to me, it feels like it's going to be the next one weird trick. And I guess if I could caution for all of you, it's still so transactional, and I think as a business, you can't underestimate the power of peer referral as well, right? So you ask whatever the assistant is to book a restaurant, but like the likelihood is that you heard of that restaurant because somebody in your life was like, this place is fantastic and you should go here.
It was Siri.
Well,
She
maybe.
told me.
I don't know. But I mean, I don't know. I think like, for me, it can't be this hard shift into that world. Like, it can't be at the sacrifice of other investments that you're making. I don't know.
So
But
I think
again,
the point,
like happy to be wrong
to
and
try and
skeptical
clarify
here.
the point that I'm making. I don't know if Lou is dying to jump in here. I think the point that I'm making is just telling the difference between search and service, and the concierge style service that comes from your digital assistant. And your digital assistant doesn't always have to go and search, because your digital assistant is multimodal, and you will get different kind of content experiences. And I think, again, not leaping too far ahead, but with the Internet of Things, again, information will come from different sources, and Google is a great place to get stuff from. But there's a lot of information that is pulled in from other sources as well. That's the point that I'm making, you know.
So the reality that I think many of us have to deal with, and some of you will agree, some of you will disagree. Today, we are probably in a world that is not about AI and machine learning as marketers sitting at our desks doing our jobs. We are probably in a reality that is about intelligent automation. Like, that is probably our day-to-day as marketers. We have to find tasks, find paths of consumer behavior, and make our content discoverable, make our information out there, and try and automate the process as best we can. You know, it would be great if we could all be at Google and have artificial intelligence and machine learning as a part of our everyday. Believe me, I work in the Google building, not for Google. And so I see this flying around the office all the time. But it is a reality that is coming very quickly to our worlds. And if we don't prepare our businesses for that reality, where machine learning and artificial intelligence are going to be how everything works.
Yes.
I mean, I tell my students this all the time. You must understand where things are going, not where it's been. There's a great Gretzky quote in there somewhere.
Yes.
Yeah.
You skate to where the puck will be, not where it is.
Exactly.
All right, so I think we've covered a few topics there, and we did drift off in a few strange places, but here we are back again.
We didn't drift, Mike. You took us.
I did.
He was our captain on that journey.
And we want you around for a while, Mike.
I was doing that intentionally. You answered a lot of great questions that I needed to know. Turn of the audience right now, though, because we've only got about 10 minutes left of C3. We have these huge brains in the industry here giving away free consultancy. I mean, being our guests. Anybody in the audience? We need the old catchbox thing. Anybody in the audience got a burning question? And I have to tell you, it's very difficult to see in the audience from here. So,
Anyone?
There you go.
Anything?
I thought it stunned you all into silence there.
You guys have talked a lot about structured data and data management over the last couple of days, and I'm curious about the platforms that you hear about that is managing that data and that structured data and storing that for organizations.
So the structured data is what you're installing on your own systems. That's the markup code that you're pulling down from schema.org, which is maintained by Google and Bing. And if you have something that's not represented in there and you think it's important, submit it, because they'll review it and see if it's worth putting in place. After that, it doesn't really matter to an engine like what system you're using. What matters is access, discoverability, cleanliness, that kind of thing. I don't know if that directly answers the question, but schema is something that it definitively lives on your end and that you maintain that. And it can be in WordPress, it can be in a custom CMS, it can be wherever you want to be, whatever's facing the internet, that's the layer it's sitting in.
I think definitely from a search point of view, way back in the day, we were talking about XML and structured data that you could feed to a search engine. Back then, you know, Google, even Microsoft was saying, no, people can interfere with that, you know, it's too spammy, that kind of thing. And yet now, although the web itself is still all of that unstructured data, the more structured data that you can provide that literally links back to an entity that's, I think that's structured data and being able to clean feed that is actually going to become very important, yes.
Yep. Agreed.
We have somebody right in the middle here.
No, it's you. Don't look surprised. It's you.
Nice catch.
My question is about Google Analytics and analytics in the future in general. I've been able to use your guys' features to further my own mission, such as like cohort analysis and having these different attribution methods, and been able to say like, hey, look, Google cares about these, we should be caring about them too. So my next question is, when do we expect to see in Google Analytics above and beyond like predictive analytics, but AI applications in analytics, and how they can be used and where they should be used?
I can't give you my roadmap today. So one of the things that's happening is, you talked about AI, but what we want to do is give you those answers before you look for them. We talked about that a little bit yesterday. One of the first steps is natural language search. So if you're able to talk to your Google Assistant, you should be able to talk to Google Analytics. And so within the app on iOS or on Android, we have that available today. And one of the things that I've observed from it is it will find aspects of your data that you didn't know that without having to look for it. So I'll get a notification that things are slower in Canada by 22%, or for some reason, I have visits from India that are 500% above normal, and that will automatically happen. Obviously, we can get even more crazy technical. You said cohort analysis, and I think this side of the room fell asleep. So we just have to, understand where it's all going, and just keep watching our blog, and our Twitter will keep you updated.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Yes. Kind of a curious thing for those of you who can't see it. The microphone that we're using is one of those catch box things, and they keep throwing it around.
Front corner.
Yeah. And I keep looking to the audience, and it's like people talking into SpongeBob SquarePants.
Yeah, this is definitely weird. So you're talking about like predicting and like, especially like when you're talking about like the park, when you have like your time, there's like 20 minutes to get to the park. Is that a concern that like it will come across as like a little bit like creepy now that you guys are constantly tracking things, and like, is that a concern of yours? Like when you're either creating content or like for like that predictive side of it, like is that a concern for you guys that like it's maybe too much tracking?
I can actually, because we had the same scenario with Cortana, and I've talked to people at Google about this. Yeah, the teams are definitely concerned about creeping people out. That doesn't help their mission in satisfying consumers. There's a funny thing that happens with that, right? We're all living in a time right now where we like to say the phrase creepy, and in another 5 years, no one's going to give a shit because they'll see the obvious value of it.
That's a technical term, by the way.
And yeah, it's like GSD, right? But they'll see the obvious value of the give of me toward what I get back, and consumer behavior, the perception will simply shift. And so what we jokingly think of now as being a little odd, like that'll be the norm. Think back to when we first had Bluetooth earbuds, right? Like prior to that, if you saw somebody walking down the street having an animated conversation out loud, you thought, cray, like totally full-blown nuts. Call the funny farm. We need a padded van. Like it was, and that was a legitimate moment, right? Today, we don't even notice these people. And half of them are legitimately certifiable. But we don't notice this now, right? Because the norm is we're all okay with it,
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's true because you learn to grow with it, and, younger people are actually, this is part of their lives and it develops with them.
Yeah.
But the one thing that I do believe that you have to do is you have to take control of your own digital life as well. So
Absolutely.
There might be a lot of stuff out there that you say is creepy. Well, maybe you have to do something about that as well.
So as the guy that sells law, can I just give the one PSA on this? If you care about privacy, if you care about security of your data, keep abreast of what's going on with net neutrality, keep abreast of what's going on with privacy laws, and influence your government.
Yeah, we tried to actually, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say there's a fun line for a lot of us to talk about. Google Analytics tracks data, that's what we do. But you talked about a change in norms. I think there's two parts to it. How many years ago would you have said, I think it's a good idea to get in a car from a stranger and meet them randomly And we're all like, that's cool, let's pay for that.
I live most of my life like that, actually.
So Uber's a thing, Lyft's a thing. We're all totally used to it. Just some random person shows up in some car, you've never met him before, and they'll take you to the airport. Great. And same thing with cameras inside our homes. I have multiple Nest cameras inside my house, not to protect me from people who might invade, but from my own children stealing things. And so I'll find my office got raided. I'm like, do you want me to play it back? Do you want me to take a look at the Nest? And we do use that. And I wanted to touch really fast. I know we're trying to cut on time. You talked about assistants earlier. One of the things that we did not talk about is people who can't read or people who are not used to typing all the time. My kids all have Google Home Minis in their room. They were $29, so I bought 10. And so basically what they do is they talk to Google every single day, sometimes before they talk to me. They expect that Google has the answer. They play any music, any song in the world. Just think how many years ago that would have been a tremendous thing. Like, oh, what, change the station? Are we kidding? And so they expect that Google knows the weather, and they ask Google what the weather is before they get dressed. They can find out how long it's going to take them to get somewhere. They even sit next to the Google Home to check their math homework. So my daughter, when she has her math homework, she'll do the answer, ask Google to get it right, and then confirm that it's true. Instead of asking Google the answer and then writing it in, they still have to show their work. But we have to understand that assistance and anything that's not requiring manual input, be it touchscreen or anything else, is really where the next generation is used to.
And hopefully not usurping parents in the process, right? Yeah.
I talk to my kids enough.
So I think that... I think we'll just jump back to the audience, but that is one very important thing that we've touched on a number of times when we talk about dealing with digital assistants, that how many interfaces can I learn? How many apps can I learn? How many, you know, at the end of the day, the ultimate interface is just to pick the device up and talk to it and wait for that to come back. So it is going to be the ultimate interface with your device. I think we have time for one more question. Just one more. Anybody have a burning issue? Right over here.
So strange. Oh my God.
You look really weird, I have to tell you, talking to a box like that.
This is for everybody on the panel. So you guys talked about challenges, you talked about various types of technology, and I'm curious, from each of your perspectives in your industry and areas of expertise, what is going to be the biggest game changer in marketing in 2018 and beyond, whether it be a piece of technology, a channel, or a strategy?
You first, Duane.
Okay, I think it's going to be the partnerships that we're starting to see with Google, we're starting to see with Alexa. Amazon just partnered with Ford to kind of take over the dash in certain vehicles. Like, these are the things that are going to change how we as consumers decide what footprints we have in our lives. Because there used to be a time when we had an infinite number of opportunities for people to come in and be different versions of something. And that's not going to be the case moving forward. It's going to be the big people, the big brands that are in there right now. These will be the assistants we invite into our lives, not some random third-party one. It'll be these ones. And that is going to wholesale set the change stage for how we get information delivered to us 5 years from now. Because those assistants will become our agents, and they're the gatekeeper.
Lisa?
So, unsurprisingly, from a Newscred perspective, I think, not really a game changer, but a game changer in terms of the various media is that, the importance of content and focusing on content. And as a result, from sort of an internal marketing team perspective, actually a lot of sort of shifts in budget. So I think, moving that SEO and sort of advertising budget and content marketing and where does it belong, I see a lot of blurring happening. So I think all of these things will come together with content at the center.
Lewis?
Well, everyone's going fast. I would say what Duane said and what she said, plus understanding the difference between measuring what matters most and not getting caught in vanity metrics. I think people who've gotten caught up on vanity metrics are going to start ignoring them soon.
And Kelly.
I noted I wear old school wristwatch, but I think this is going to be a year when everyone is focusing so much on digital that actually old channels are going to have a lot more space for people to do really interesting things with them. So, traditional out-of-home advertising, what can we do with direct mail this year? Who knows? But I think it's going to be opportunity for people who have the desire and interest in getting creative with things that aren't digital to do some really cool things.
Interesting. And Lou?
Trying to keep it quick, and I'll give a different perspective. I think regulations like GDPR are going to dramatically change how we as marketers operate, particularly in Europe. And the shape of law is tremendously changing on this front, and that's why I gave the PSA, but it's important to understand how our lives as marketers are going to be more and more difficult, even though the technology is evolving.
Sage advice from our panel. Please give them a big round of applause.